name is Rachel, and I'm with Cookie Jar Crimes. Today we're going to be talking about Helen Munnings. When Helen was 20 years old, she walked out of her mom's home and left, never to be seen or heard from again. She was born on March 15, 1988. She was raised by her mom, Carol Black, sometimes referred to as Carol Munnings. Her father was not involved in her life, and as far as I can tell, she had never even met him. She grew up with her older brother, Mark, and two younger sisters, Linda and Catherine. They lived off the coast in Burnie, Tasmania, in Australia. Burnie has a population of around 20,000 people. Helen was known to be a naive yet nice, generous girl. She loved clothes and jewelry. Her grandmother, Julie Payne, said Helen loved to go through her jewelry box. Her brother Mark said she was a beautiful, loving girl that would help anyone if they needed it. She didn't have a mean bone in her body. Her family also said it would have been very uncharacteristic for her to just disappear. In 2004, Helen met a man named Adam Taylor at a neighbor's house. He was 30 years old. He was a local tiler, concreter, and he attended bars occasionally. Helen was only 16. She and Adam became intimate around September or October of 2004 in the home of a mutual friend, despite the fact that the age of consent in Tasmania is 17. Adam claimed that he was drunk and wasn't really in control of his actions. He said that Helen came on to him and he hardly even had a memory of it. They became friends, but for Helen, it was so much more. For Helen, it was love at first sight. When she turned 17, she told him he was the only one for her, and she began to pressure him to have a committed relationship with her. Adam said he only agreed to a relationship with her because she told him if he didn't, she would go to the police and tell them he had slept with her when she was just 16. Eventually, Helen became pregnant. Adam, of course, denied the baby was his. According to Helen's mom, Adam would tell people she was just a girl. He didn't even know her. Why would Adam want to deny the baby was his? Well, it turns out Adam was in a long-term committed relationship with a lovely lady much closer to his age range, Carolina Garwood, better known as Kaz. Adam and Kaz had 2 children together. They all lived together at 61 Syce Avenue in Haybridge. Their home was next to the sea on a narrow strip of land between the Bass Highway and Bass Strait, about 8 kilometers east of Burnie. That's why Adam wanted to deny any connection with Helen. Unfortunately for Adam, although people lie, DNA does not. It's difficult to have a child with someone you've never met. That would be impressive. Carol, Helen's mom, disapproved of the relationship between Adam and her daughter. The thing that troubled Carol the most about her daughter's relationship with Adam was the age difference between them. Helen was still a child in high school. Adam was a grown adult man. Carol didn't know his age. She had been told he was 23, but she found out later he was nearly 30 and that he had a girlfriend. Carol did everything she could to try to end the relationship. She turned Adam into the police more than once, and as you can imagine, this did not make for a close bond between mom and daughter. Their relationship was full of arguing. They even had restraining orders placed against one another. The reason given for why the police did nothing about Adam's having an intimate relationship with Helen while she was underage is because they said they had reason to believe that Adam thought Helen was 17 at the time. Helen's mom still has a Roxy watch that she says Adam gave to Helen for her 16th birthday. On March 30th, 2006, Helen found a new love. She gave birth to her darling baby boy. She had just turned 18 years of age. Although she was young, she loved and doted on her son just as much as any mom ever has. Soon after the birth, Kaz discovered that Adam had a baby with Helen. Kaz believed that the baby had been conceived while she and Adam were on a break in the relationship. She was unaware that the relationship between Helen and Adam was still ongoing. Adam seemed to love Carolina and want their relationship to work out, but not enough. Not enough to stay out of Helen's life. Helen began harassing him with demanding phone calls and texts. Afterward, they agreed that all communication would be channeled through his mom, Judy Taylor. Adam did not stick to this arrangement. He bought a second mobile phone in order to keep in contact with Helen. He said this was to prevent the frequent messages to his other mobile phone, or to his home phone. Judy and Kaz, however, were not aware of this phone. There is little doubt that Adam continued to maintain some affection for Helen despite her difficult behavior. There's possibly some truth in his suggestion that he wanted to offer Helen some support just for the sake of creating a better life for their son. But it is more likely he just wanted to maintain the intimate part of the relationship for selfish reasons. According to Adam, he stopped having relations with Helen after the initial fling, but that they had gotten together one last time in 2007. Adam said it was a mistake, and again, it was all Helen's fault for pressuring him. Adam said at the inquest in 2011 and 12 that he even contemplated committing suicide afterward. Messages that were exchanged between the two would tell a much different story. There were explicit messages sent by each of them, not just her. The messages were being sent up until at least May of 2008. Helen's sisters and some of her friends gave evidence of Helen's strong and ongoing affection for Adam. Some suspected that the personal relationship between them was continuing secretively. Helen's sister, Linda Black, said she knew that Helen and Adam went for drives occasionally. At the time of her disappearance, Helen Munnings lived in Unit 3 in a building owned by Mrs. Black at No. 2 Charles Street in Burney. Her mom lived upstairs in the same building in Unit 1. Helen and her son had only been living at that address for a few weeks. Before that, they lived in a home on Romaine Street in South Burney for 2 months with her friend Alan Monday, whom she met when he lived on Hodgman Street near her mom's home. Prior to that, they lived for about a year in a rented flat at Sutton Street. The motivating force in Helen Munnings' life was her son. All the evidence during the inquest showed the love, devotion, and affection she had for him. Although looking after him was not always easy, and there were many factors in her life that presented challenges for her, she continued to make the best life for her son that she knew how to. She received a single parenting payment from Centerlink that was paid directly into her account at the Commonwealth Bank. According to her mother, she was relatively careful with her money and she budgeted well. She had accumulated a debt to Centerlink of about $2,500 due to an overpayment arising from the level of her entitlement during a time period when her son wasn't living with her. The debt was being repaid by deduction from her ongoing benefit. Immediately before Helen's disappearance, she began sharing the care of her son with Adam on a week-on, week-off basis. That arrangement had been in place for several weeks, and prior to that, he had been in Adam's care for a period of time. Until then, he had been primarily in Helen's care. The care of Helen's son had been the subject of ongoing discussion and disagreement between Helen and Adam. Arrangements concerning their son's care had attracted the involvement of CPS. When with Adam, Helen's son lived at home with Adam and Kaz at Haybridge, and he was sometimes placed at daycare at the Wisteria Lane Child Care Center in Burney. Helen Munnings owned a car, which was kept at her mom's home. She did not have a driver's license, but she had recently gotten the car and was going to be working on getting her driver's license. In the meantime, she walked to where she wanted to go, or sometimes she was given lifts by family members or friends. She had a mobile phone which she used to make calls and send text messages. However, in the time before her disappearance, she would sometimes remove the SIM card from her own phone and use it in phones owned by others because she was having issues with the phone and it wasn't reliable. A consistent and strong theme emerging from the evidence of Helen's family and friends and acquaintances, many of whom have sworn affidavits and some of whom attended the inquest to give evidence, is that Helen had no intimate relationship with any other man and was not interested in anyone except Adam Taylor. Except for something, Adam said there is no evidence at all of any relationship between Helen and another male other than friendship. Helen told her sister Linda that she was pregnant and that Adam was the father. She also told her friend Belinda Rasmussen. Helen did not tell her mother that she was pregnant, but that is probably due to the fact that her mom did not approve of Adam or their relationship. Helen Munnings also told Adam that she was pregnant. On July 8, 2008, Mr. Taylor went with Helen to a pharmacy in Bernie where she purchased a pregnancy test. After taking the test, she shared the positive result with him. Surprise! Adam once again denied that he was the father of the child. Helen now had to decide what she would do. There was ongoing communication between her and Adam about this. On the same day, Mr. Taylor and Helen Munnings went together to inspect a rental property on Abbott Street in Bernie, intending to find her a place to live. Adam said the reason he didn't support continuation of the pregnancy was because another child would have placed additional demands on Helen's already challenging situation. However, the evidence, including the course of text messages sent by Helen to Adam, strongly suggests that after an initial period of uncertainty and anxious consideration, she had decided to keep the baby. Coroner Robert Pierce said that he was fairly certain that Helen was pregnant at the time of her disappearance, and that Adam Taylor was the father of the child. He also said that it was pretty obvious that Adam's intimate relationship with Helen continued in 2008. Mr. Kelly and his wife Alana knew Helen, and a couple of months before she disappeared, Mr. Kelly and his wife saw a male he knew as the young child's father at the house in Romaine Street, in circumstances that suggested a continuing intimate relationship.
Helen denies he was in a sexual relationship with Helen in the weeks and months leading up to her disappearance. Your reaction says it all.
Yeah, he can deny as much as he likes he was.
Shortly before Helen disappeared, family friends Anthony and Alana Kelly had dropped by her house to lend her a suitcase.
As I knocked on the door, I noticed from the frosted glass Helen come out of one of the bedrooms.
Quickly pulling clothing on.
And Adam came out of the same room, and he was pulling clothes on himself at the same time, so...
They were clearly still in a sexual relationship.
Yes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
So what did Helen say to you after that incident?
She was in tears, begging us, please don't tell anyone. You can't tell anyone. But yeah, she was wasn't she? She was hysterical, bawling her eyes out.
What was she so afraid of?
Adam's insistence on keeping the relationship secret. He was big on it. Absolutely huge on it.
On Wednesday, July 23, 2008, Helen was spending time in her mom's unit with her mom and sisters. She told them she had an appointment at the clinic. She left and walked towards the center of Bernie. She left the keys to her flat on the table in her mom's flat with a letter that she had brought earlier to show her mom. She was wearing plain black pants and a blue hoodie that Helen and Linda had bought together only a few days earlier. She was wearing her hair tied up in a ponytail at the back. She had recently changed her hair color from light blonde to light brown. And she was not carrying a bag. The bag that she usually carried was later found by the police in her flat. Among the items in the bag were her purse, her mobile phone without the SIM card, her medication, and receipts. The purse contained her cards, including her bank account card and Medicare card. Linda had spent a lot of time with Helen over the week or so before that day. She stayed with her at Helen's unit overnight on the 22nd of July. On Monday, July 21st, an appointment was made for Helen to see a doctor at the city medical practice on the following day, July 22nd. Linda was to attend that appointment with Helen, but Helen canceled it. Linda's recollection is that on July 23rd, before she left home, Helen told her that she intended to walk to the city medical practice to make another doctor's appointment. Carol's recollection is that Helen told her she was going to the doctor for a pap smear. Both were left with the impression that Helen would not be gone long. although neither knew whether Helen had any other plans. Helen did not have a doctor's appointment, and there's no evidence that she went to make one. Earlier in the day, Adam and Helen had made plans via phone or text to meet up when he was finished working for the day, while Carolina watched their baby. He picked her up in his mom's white Holden rodeo ute near the Centerlink building at about 4:15 or 4:20 p.m. after driving around looking for her, because he didn't see her right away. Beyond this point, the only person's word we have to go on is his. He said they then drove around and talked, mainly about her pregnancy and what she was going to do. Adam said that she told him the pregnancy was a result of a drunken one-night stand and that she didn't want to be like her mom with multiple babies to multiple fathers. Adam wanted her to have an abortion. Of course, if it wasn't even his baby and he didn't want a relationship with her, why in the world would it have mattered to him whether she kept the baby? It wasn't really his business, or maybe it's because he knew this baby was his as well. Adam said that Helen became emotional and that she cried, but that she was better toward the end of their conversation. She told him she wanted to take a walk and clear her head. So he dropped her off on the southern side of the Bass Highway, near the old pulp mill, at or just before 6 p.m. By that time it was dark, or getting dark. He then drove west for a short distance before doing a U-turn and driving east towards his home at Haybridge. On the way, he said he stopped at Round Hill to reflect on the things they had discussed during the drive. During that time, he sent a text message to Helen's phone number at 6 p.m., and it said, "Keep your chin up." There was no reply to this text, but even if she was alive at this point, Helen had only the SIM card from her phone. That Helen Munnings walked into Bernie and met Mr. Taylor is corroborated by CCTV footage located by the police during the investigation. A camera located in the Centerlink building, Marine Terrace in Bernie, shows an image of a female figure with an appearance consistent with Helen's appearance walking past the building at or shortly after 4 p.m. The same camera shows a white utility vehicle looking like Mr. Taylor's vehicle, driving south on Marine Terrace, and then at 4:22 p.m. it returns north past Centerlink. A camera located at McGinney's Bar at a hotel just around the corner then shows what appears to be the same vehicle near the traffic lights at the corner of Wilson Street and the Bass Highway. The text message that Adam sent to Helen's phone is confirmed by the phone records, which disclose a message sent at 6:08 p.m. on that day. However, the message itself was not preserved, and it's not in evidence. Later that evening, Carol Black became concerned when Helen did not return. She could hear the radio playing in Helen's flat, and she used Helen's keys to let herself into the flat, but there was no sign of Helen. When Helen did not return the next day, Mrs. Black's concern increased. Sometime after lunch on Thursday, the 24th of July, Mrs. Black went to the police station and reported her concern. She went back to the police station later that night and made a formal statement. Helen did not pick up her son on Friday, the 25th of July, 2008, as she was scheduled to do. This was a major signal that something was definitely not right. The police conducted extensive searches attempting to find Helen Munnings. None of the searches found any trace of Helen or anything connected with her. The search efforts included a marine, land, and aerial search conducted over 2 days on July 28th and 29th of 2008 in the Emu Bay area, extending from the Bernie Wharf at the west to Round Hill Point about 4 kilometers to the east. The rescue helicopter was used, and about 8 search and rescue officers conducted the land search. More searches were conducted later as further information was given to the police. On the 6th of August 2008, the search was expanded from Round Hill Point to Sulphur Creek, a further 8 kilometers or so east. A search was also performed at Fern Glade, an area near the Emu River south of the coast. These searches involved 6 to 8 search and rescue officers. August 12, 2008, Constable Wotherspoon coordinated and took part in a waterborne search of the Emu and Blythe rivers. The Emu River was searched from the mouth to the Fernglade Weir, a distance of about 1.7 kilometers. The Blythe River was searched from the mouth upstream about 3 kilometers to impassable rapids at the Magazine Reserve. On August 14th and 15th of 2008, First Class Constable Lee Stanley of the Tasmania Police Marine and Rescue Services, based in Hobart, supervised the police search and rescue dive team which conducted underwater searches in Emu Bay. The area searched included South Burney Beach and the mouth of the Emu River. In May of 2009, a reward of $50,000 was offered for any information regarding the disappearance of Helen. More searches were conducted the following year. On June 2nd, 2009, Constable Wotherspoon coordinated searches at Lake Cara, and on June 3rd, 2009, a further area at Haybridge was searched. The search area was a small bay off the beach just east of Sauce Avenue, near Adams' home. On the same days, Constable Stanley supervised underwater searches undertaken by the search and rescue dive team at the same locations. Lake Cara was searched on the 2nd of June, 2009, and a search of the coastal line in Haybridge area on the following day. The search that took place on June 3rd, 2009 is when they made an unusual discovery out the front of Adams Place. A bucket of concrete with a hook in the top and a small rope attached was located in water several meters in front of the Sauce Avenue home. In August of 2009, more than a year later, police also conducted a thorough search of Adams' house. A substantial amount of rope, which appeared to match the color of that tied to the bucket of concrete, was located on the premises and seized. The dinghy was also the subject of forensic testing. Sergeant Chugg says he doubts Helen's remains are even in the water at all. Due to the sensitivity of the matter, he couldn't go into detail, but he said based on other known facts, which police uncovered during the investigation, he finds it more likely that Helen's remains were disposed of on land. But where and by whom? On June 17, 2009, Constable Wotherspoon coordinated a search of the roads and tracks around the Round Hill Lookout. Also, on June 17th, Constable Stanley supervised the dive team underwater search of the weir at the Fernglade Reserve, which had been opened to allow the water level to drop. Fernglade was one of Helen's favorite places to hang out and meet with friends, so the police searched it after a suggestion from her family. On July 14, 2009, Constable Wotherspoon assisted with the coordination and execution of searches of the land adjacent to the Cam River at Scarth, Somerset. In September 2009, Sergeant Paul Steen, the officer in charge of the police dive squad, supervised and participated in an underwater search at Lake Llewellyn. Lake Llewellyn is near Sisters Beach, about 40 kilometers west of Burney. 2 areas of the lake were searched. On September 2nd, an area in front of the lake shacks, and on September 3rd, an area in front of the dam to a depth of 7 meters. All of the underwater searches were conducted by a full dive team consisting of a dive supervisor and 2 divers and attendants. The dive conditions at Lake Cara and Lake Llewellyn were difficult. Constable Stanley described the water searched by his team as black water, indicating that visibility was low and that search techniques using hands and guide ropes were required. Nevertheless, Constable Stanley was confident of the result of the search in each case. Sergeant Steen was less confident of the search of Lake Llewellyn. Adam Taylor's behavior was somewhat strange on the day of Helen's disappearance. He did go to work on July 23, 2008. According to Kaz, he returned home in the Mitsubishi Pajero at about 2:45 p.m. to swap cars. He left in his mom's Holden Ute at about 3:30 p.m. She said she thought he had loaded a saw onto the tray of the Ute. Mr. Taylor returned home just after 6 p.m. And just before then, he had phoned Kaz, as he often did, to check and see if she needed anything. The phone records show that phone call. After he returned home, he reported to her that he thought someone may have tried to steal the dinghy that they kept at their house, which belonged to Kaz's brother. He told her that someone had dragged the dinghy from the place in the yard where it was normally kept down to the water's edge, and he was going out to drag it back up. By then it was dark. In the course of doing so, he put the boat in the water, started the motor of the boat, and drove it a short distance before turning and bringing it back in. He spent some more time in his shed that evening, but according to Kaz, this was not unusual. She also said he was walking in between the cars in their driveway. Another interesting thing to note is that Kaz had been outside earlier that evening. She said the dinghy was in the same place it was always located. The next morning, Mr. Taylor loaded the boat onto the trailer and took it to Mr. Garwood's block at Cunningham Street. Despite all of the police searches for evidence about Miss Munnings, only one item of any interest was found. And that was the bucket that they found outside of Adam's home at Haybridge. And Adam did admit that that bucket was his. He said that it was used for mooring, but the divers said it was not in a location that would have been useful for that. So, possible explanations for Helen's disappearance. Well, there's no evidence that anyone has seen or heard from Helen Munnings since 6 p.m. on Wednesday, July 23, 2008. There is a considerable reward of $300,000 on offer for information that might lead to her discovery, but there's been no success in that. There's no direct evidence of what became of Helen. There's really only two possible explanations. The first is she's dead. Her body hasn't been located. The second is that she is living somewhere else. Helen Munnings was a young person. She lived in Burney for all of her life. Most of her family and friends also lived there. She had relatively limited education. She had a limited income and no savings. There's no evidence to support a planned departure. Her flat was left untidy. She did not take her purse with the cards it contained. She did not take her phone or any other personal belongings or clothing. She told no one of any intention to leave. She was pregnant and would have needed medical care, and there was never a report of her. She did not have her Medicare card, and since July 23, 2008, there has been no claim on Medicare or any pharmaceutical benefit paid in her name. It is extremely unlikely that Helen relocated. If she had done that, I believe she would have taken her son with her. Her mom's and her sister's anguish over her disappearance is either legit or they deserve an Oscar. As part of the investigation, officers of Tasmania Police checked for evidence that Helen might be alive. Initially, the search was conducted in the name Munnings, later in the name of Black. No trace has been found. She has not been heard of by the police in any other jurisdiction in Australia. No airline has any record of a person traveling in either name, Munnings or Black. No one in either name has traveled on the Spirit of Tasmania. There has been no contact or transaction with the Australian Electoral Commission, the Registrar of Births, Deaths and Marriages, Corrective Services, Housing Tasmania, Aurora Mental Health Services, the Land Titles Office, and the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Significantly, there has been no transaction on any bank account in her name or in the name Helen Carroll Black since her disappearance. She held an account at the Commonwealth Bank which had a balance of $1,100 and into which her Centrelink benefit was paid. There has been no transaction on the account since the 23rd of July 2008, and the account's being depleted by a $5 monthly inactive account fee. The police made an inquiry of 10 of the most commonly used financial institutions, and none had any record of Helen since her disappearance. Counsel for Adam suggested it is possible that Helen is living in Darwin. The basis for this suggestion is that Helen has an uncle living in Darwin, and that after Helen's disappearance, Carol Black spent some months in Darwin, and during that time period, Judy Taylor, Adam's mom, received a phone call from an unidentified female from a Darwin number referring to Helen. The suggested inference is that Mrs. Black went to Darwin to help Helen become established there. There is no evidence to suggest it's true. It is extremely unlikely that Helen relocated. Coroner Robert Pierce said the only reasonable explanation for Helen's disappearance and continued absence is that she is dead. So what is the cause of Helen Munnings' death? One scenario that might explain Helen's disappearance is that she took her own life. Helen was a young person facing a number of factors that would be stressful for her. There was conflict in her relationship with Adam and her relationship with her mom. She was a single mom with limited income and support. Finding out she was pregnant again and trying to decide what to do about that was a source of worry and stress for her. She was faced with the prospect of telling her mom about the pregnancy and the increased conflict this would likely bring. Although it is clear that Helen's wish was that Adam would leave Kaz to enter a stable and supportive long-term relationship with her, there was little likelihood of this happening, and he was not supportive of her pregnancy. According to Adam, during the car trip on July 23, 2008, he and Helen discussed matters concerning the relationship that were distressing for Helen. Adam's evidence is that during the journey, Helen was crying and was upset, and in effect, she poured her heart out to him about the problems in her life. However, by the time he dropped her off, he said she appeared to have calmed down. Although there is some evidence that Helen had spoken or sent text messages to friends about suicide, it was only in a very general and conversational way. There is no evidence at all that she had ever made an attempt or a serious threat of suicide. There's no evidence of self-harm. The evidence of Alana Kelly is illuminating. Mrs. Kelly met Helen through her daughter, who was friends with Linda Black. For a period, Helen was frequently at her home. Mrs. Kelly described how during a period when Helen lived at Sutton Street and relations with her mom were at a low point, that Helen appeared stressed and depressed. She had a low self-esteem. Mrs. Kelly suggested that Helen might seek some outside help. Over time, however, Helen's presentation improved. Mrs. Kelly said that Helen was working through her problems and making plans for the future. The prospect of suicide is reduced by her relationship with her son. Mrs. Kelly described Helen as worshiping her little boy. In early 2008, Helen Munnings consulted a general practitioner, Dr. Olamola, at the City Medical Practice. Dr. Olamola appeared at the inquest and gave helpful evidence. Nothing he said leads us to believe that Helen was suicidal. He first saw Helen on February 7, 2008. He considered that she was moderately depressed, but she was not suicidal. She communicated well. She made good eye contact. He prescribed antidepressant medication commonly used in young people, but at the lowest dose. Dr. Olamola saw her twice more, the last time being on March 21, 2008. Although he suggested a follow-up appointment, Helen did not return and did not keep the appointment she made on July 21, 2008. Dr. Ian Sell, a highly experienced psychiatrist, gave evidence based on information given by Adam Taylor. His opinion was that the factors impacting Helen's life meant that suicide was a possibility. However, despite Dr. Sell's undoubted expertise, it was just an opinion he made with little to go on. The absence of a body does not completely rule out suicide, although it is unusual. If Adam's account that he dropped Helen on the Bass Highway near the pulp mill at about 6 p.m. is to be accepted, then she would have had a very limited means to cause her own death. She had nothing with her. There is no evidence to suggest she had any plan. Constable Dean Witherspoon has been a member of the police search and rescue squad since 1997. He gave evidence about two particular aspects of the possibility that Helen may have committed suicide by drowning. First, he explained factors which show it is quite difficult for a person to deliberately drown themselves. The natural buoyancy of the human body makes it likely that it will float unless weighted down or until the lungs fill up with water. It would take a remarkable effort of human resolve to deliberately stay underwater to the point of drowning. Had Helen weighted her body, then that would have increased the likelihood she would have been found during the search. On the other hand, a possibility is that she simply entered the ocean and swam out so far she could not return. In that case, the fact that Helen's body was not located may be explained by either the effect of the currents during the time her body may have been submerged or the effects of the exposure of the body to marine creatures. It may be that the combination of factors that prevailed at the time led to a personal crisis for Helen. The evidence does not justify finding that she took her own life. There is no evidence that she did so. However, in the absence of another explanation, it remains a possible reason for her disappearance. So the last explanation is that if Helen is dead, was it contributed to by another person? Unfortunately, there is no direct evidence that any person contributed to the death of Helen Munnings. The actions of her mom at the time and since then are quite inconsistent with her playing any part. Adam was the last person to see Helen alive. He was the only person to see her after she left home on that afternoon. He gave evidence at the inquest and told the police that he picked her up at about 4:15 p.m. He said he dropped her off on the highway at or shortly before 6 p.m. As a result of a police appeal for information, many people came forward. The police took numerous statements about what was seen and when. All of those people had a sincere desire to be helpful. Some of them gave evidence during the inquest. However, none of them gave any evidence that would make us think that a person they saw on that day or any other day after July 23, 2008 was Helen Munnings. Not only is there no other evidence to indicate what may have become of Helen, there is also no evidence to corroborate Adam's version that Helen was dropped off by him at that time and location. One of the issues raised during the inquest is whether Adam is a person who contributed to the cause of Helen's death. According to the coroner, Robert Pierce, the evidence did not justify finding Adam as a person who contributed to the cause of Helen's death. Although the relationship between Adam and Helen continued for some years, it was at times tumultuous and turbulent, characterized by ill will. Helen's disappearance coincided with a period during which Adam and Kaz were attempting to preserve their relationship in circumstances that had been difficult for some time. The difficulty in Adam's and Kaz's relationship was contributed to by a large extent because of Helen and her sometimes difficult behavior. Helen was very likely pregnant. At least she had indicated to Adam that she would tell others that she was pregnant and that he was the father. Even if that assertion was mischievous and untrue, it was likely to impact Adam in a number of respects, not least of which would be to place additional strain on his relationship with Kaz. Adam's account to the police and during the inquest of his relationship with Helen Munnings was at least incomplete. Not to mention that in the period prior to Helen's disappearance, Adam concealed the true nature of his relationship and contact with Helen from Kaz and his mother, Judy. Adam gave different versions to the police of the route he says he took after he picked Helen up and before he dropped her off, and there's some question about whether the journey he described would have occupied all the time he was with her. Adam said that he dropped Helen where he did because she asked him to do so, saying she wanted to go for a walk on the beach to clear her head. It seems to me to be an unusual thing to agree to drop a young girl alone at that location, some distance from her home at that time when it was becoming dark. It was July and Helen was not dressed particularly warmly. It gets pretty cold and burny, and July is typically the coldest month in Tasmania. Helen's best friend, Belinda Rasmussen, said it was not like Helen at all to want to go for a walk alone in the dark. She said Helen was always scared of the dark and never wanted to walk in the dark, even if there were street lights. The account he gave of his actions with the boat when he got home on that evening might be viewed as incongruous. Suspicious of Adam, Carol Black and her mom, Julie Payne, went to Adam's home on Saturday, July 27th. Mrs. Payne later told the police that Adam had made a statement to her which she regarded as indication that he knew that Helen was not coming back. She claims that much later, in October of 2009, she approached Mr. Taylor in the supermarket. She asked him where Helen's body was, and in response, he threatened, "You'll get the same done to you that Helen did." Helen's mom made reference to a van owned by Mr. Garwood that was at Adam's house and implied by her questions about it that it may have been used for some unlawful purpose. This was the coroner Robert Pierce's final words from the evidence that was presented at the inquest. He said, "None of these factors justify a finding that Mr. Taylor contributed to Helen Munnings' death. For such a significant finding, clear and logical, convincing evidence is required. There is no such evidence. Without more, evidence of a motive is meaningless. Although lies may affect his credibility, generally they do not prove that his account of the events of July 23rd is untrue, much less that he contributed to her death. No conclusions can be drawn from inconsistencies in his accounts of the car journey with Helen. His account of the time and location he picked her up and the later sending of a text message is corroborated by other evidence. His account of what happened with the boat is not far-fetched. I am unable to draw any conclusions from the finding of the bucket. There is an innocent explanation for its presence. It was in a location which meant that it was covered by only about half a meter of water at low tide, and it was used by Mr. Taylor to secure the boat from time to time. Given the high degree of ill-feeling and suspicion Mrs. Black and Mrs. Payne hold towards Mr. Taylor, I have considerable reservations about their evidence, about the statements they suggested were admissions. Even if their evidence is correct, I would not regard either statement as an admission that carries any weight. I should not lose sight of the fact that despite an extensive police investigation, there is no scientific or forensic evidence that supports a finding that Mr. Taylor contributed to the death of Helen Munnings. The investigation did not include testing of Mr. Garwood's van, but there is no other evidence that suggests that the van was somehow involved. Those were all Robert Pierce words. Robert Pierce also said he made no formal recommendation or comment concerning Helen Munnings' death, except to indicate that the police investigation into it should remain open. Further evidence may become available. The evidence I have referred to in this decision does not permit any finding other than Helen Munnings died on or about July 23, 2008, in or near Bernie. No finding can be made about how or why she died or whether any person contributed to the cause of her death. Carol Black believes that the police investigation was sloppy and that they messed up. When they brought Adam in for an interview, they saw scratches on him, and he said he had received the scratches because of his job. During the interview, Adam began to feel ill and dizzy. They said they had to discontinue the interview because he wasn't doing well. They did not do any forensics on the scratches that were on him. They did not check his home, the shore in front of his home, his cars, or the dinghy for almost an entire year. I cannot possibly understand why they did not do these searches much sooner. The dinghy was at Mr. Garwood's home for 3 days before Adam brought it back to his home in Haybridge. Why? This is very strange. During the search of his home and property, police found the bucket of concrete with the hook and rope attached to it. And inside the house, they found rope that matched the color of the rope that was attached to the bucket. Forensic testing showed no human fiber on the rope. But that's not really surprising. It was nearly a year later before they searched his property and did this testing. Adam admitted the bucket was his, and he said it was used to moor his dinghy, but the divers said that the bucket was not found in an area where it would have had a purpose for mooring. I think the search teams did an amazing job with the searches they did do. But it's what they didn't do that haunts me and makes me wonder why. Even a rookie knows to always look at a boyfriend, girlfriend, mistress thoroughly. They should have tested his place and interviewed Kaz immediately. They did not interview Kaz for nearly 12 months. If they would have interviewed her, they would have heard about his strange behavior that day and then tested the boat, the foreshore in front of his home, the van that Kaz said he had borrowed from her dad, and his house. I can't help but think this case might have been solved within a week or two if they had searched Adam more closely. And they should have done photos and forensics on those scratches. A lie detector would have been nice. They have never even charged him with sleeping with a minor. What was Adam like? Is he the kind of person that could do this? Well, he was certainly a liar. He was really good at it. He lied about sleeping with Helen, about being her baby's daddy. He gave different stories about the route he took the day he went driving with Helen, and he obviously lied about someone trying to steal the boat. He was a cheater. He was a liar. He was also a drunk driver. To have a breathalyzer fitted to your car means you have had 2 convictions of drunk driving. He had a history of violence, according to Belinda Rasmussen, Helen's best friend. Helen came running up to her flat one day crying because Adam had put his hands around her throat and shoved her up against the wall. She told Belinda he did it because she had made a remark against Kaz. She also said this was not the first time he had been violent with her. Helen's cousin, Chris Isherwood, stated that just a few months before she disappeared, he had taken Helen to visit Adam at his home in Haybridge. He said that Helen and Adam began to argue, and Adam pushed Helen into the car and held her down by her throat. It was stated during the inquest that Adam did this because there was a restraining order against Helen, and Adam was trying to get her to leave. I personally don't see that as justification for putting your hands on a lady's throat. Kaz testified that a few months before Helen went missing, Adam had put his hands around her throat. She said she didn't feel threatened in any way, though. Did Adam have the motive to kill Helen? Helen kept pressuring him to be with only her. In his testimony at the inquest, he said he found her to be unattractive, and he only slept with her to keep her from going to the police about them having relations when she was underage. After he did sleep with her in 2008, he said he contemplated suicide. That, to me, sounds like he was feeling desperate. He didn't want another child with Helen, but it appeared she was going to go through with the pregnancy with or without his consent. When they first had relations in 2004, he said he was drunk and barely had a memory of sleeping with her. His own words. Well, since he struggles with his memory when he's drunk, and he isn't above drinking and driving, maybe he murdered her on July 23, 2008, and doesn't remember it. He had some memory issue when it came to the route he used that day, too. Or maybe, as he stated when they first slept together, during the drive, maybe he just wasn't in control of his actions. Do y'all want to know my opinion as to whether or not I think Adam did it? What do y'all think? I will say this. I have some men in my life, men of integrity, and they would not leave a lady in a secluded area alone at night the way he did, without at the very least waiting there for her. A big red flag to me is that he showed no remorse for leaving Helen, the mother of his child, in a remote location and not bothering to check on her. I would think an innocent man would grieve over that decision and say how they wish they could go back and do it differently. I would think an innocent man would apologize to her mom, grandmother, child, and family for ever putting her into the situation. Situation meaning pregnant, unloved, used, unwanted. For putting her in that situation in the first place, and to top it all off, allowing her to be put in harm's way. Helen's mom doesn't get to see her precious grandbaby. He's being raised by Adam's mom, Judy Taylor. He would be around 14 years old now. That's the reason I did not give her son's name, because he is still a minor. He's still age 14. It's very easy to find his name. You can find it on lots of sources, but I did not list it on here. This is my very first true crime case to put on YouTube. So offer me suggestions, but please do it in a nice, respectful way. I worked very hard on this to try and bring honor to the memory of Helen Munnings and hopefully help in solving her murder. Please remember when leaving comments that Helen's family may be reading them. So keep them kind-hearted and respectful to the memory of their precious loved one. Okay, a quick disclaimer. In case I made any mistakes in the information or names, please forgive me, and you can leave that in the comments if you notice any mistakes I made. I love the Lord and I love God's word, so I just have one more thing to leave with you, and especially the murderer of Helen Munnings. In Luke chapter 12, verse 2 through 3, it says, "There is nothing uncovered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Therefore whatsoever you have spoken in darkness shall be heard in the light, and that which you have spoken in the ear and closets shall be proclaimed upon the housetops." My heart breaks for Helen. She deserves someone that will love her, and only her. Helen, you are loved and remembered, and we pray that one day soon your murderer will have to pay for ending your life. Your murderer took you from your mom, your brother, your grandmother, your sisters, your friends, worst of all, your precious innocent son. Not only did he end your life, he ended the life of the innocent little baby in your womb. It was not given the right to play, love, dream, dance, live, and look into his or her mommy's eyes and exchange sweet smiles and tender glances. You were robbed on July 23, 2008 of all your hopes and dreams. Not only were you robbed, but this world was robbed of all the pleasure and beauty you would have graced it with. My heart breaks for Kaz and all the precious ladies out there in relationships with men like Adam. Men who can never love a lady above himself and are not brave enough to choose only one. To choose one and let the other go is an unselfish, merciful kind of love. Anyone who says they love you but will not choose only you is a fraud and not aware of real love or how to be a real man. Thank you. I hope you guys have a great day.